Welcome to the Cleveland Community Police Commission full commission meeting for Wednesday, April 22nd, 2026. We will welcome you all and call this meeting to order. I'll start with a roll call attendance. Co-Chair Adams.
Present.
Commissioner Chura.
Present.
Commissioner Coleman is not in attendance. Commissioner Kincaid.
Present.
Commissioner Mason.
Present.
Commissioner Miller.
Present.
Commissioner Morero Benito.
Present.
Commissioner Nelson is not quite here. Commissioner Adriana Rodriguez is not quite here. Commissioner Umelson.
Present.
Commissioner Van Leer.
Present.
And I am present. Thank you. We're going to go to the next item on the agenda, which is the adoption of the agenda. I move to adopt the agenda with the correction that Commissioner Kincaid will give the Rules Committee update, and immediately after, she will give the Outreach Committee update. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any nay? Okay, that passes.
Richard, I said the wrong thing. It's the wrong thing.
Wrong much?
I said the wrong thing.
Yeah, right there.
That is not the right thing.
That's not the wearable.
That's wearable. It should be the corrective action. I was moving towards my bad.
Next on the agenda is the meeting decorum. This meeting of the Cleveland Community Police Commission is a lawful meeting. Under Section 605.04 of the Codified Ordinance, no person with purpose to prevent or disrupt a lawful meeting shall do any act which obstructs or interferes with the due conduct of such meeting. Members of the public are invited to speak in accordance with the public comment rules. Disruptions including but not limited to speaking out of turn and or making loud utterances that interferes with the due conduct of this lawful meeting may constitute as a misdemeanor and a violation of section 605.04. If this meeting is disrupted, I will call for a recess and the room will be cleared. Persons who violate the city ordinance and commit misdemeanors may be subject to prosecution. When this body is able to return from recess, then in compliance with the Ohio Open Meeting Act and Section 101.021 of the Codified Ordinance, the meeting will be open to the public. Next on the agenda is the approval of the meeting minutes. Shelley, you didn't send out the minutes, did you? We will move past that and move that to the next meeting. Next on the item on the agenda is public comment. Is there anyone that would like to make public comment? Okay, since there's no one that would like to make a public comment, we'll move forward. 1 second. We'll move forward with the executive director report.
Okay, good evening, everyone. I did send out a copy of the executive director report to all commissioners. You should have that in your inboxes, and so I'll just kind of go expeditiously through what has been going on in the office for the month of April. So you guys know that we have been trying to staff up around here, and I am pleased to say that we did finally hire an office coordinator, Ms. Lisa Johnson. She will be joining our team on May 4th. She is coming to us by way of the Cleveland Municipal School District, and she will be, again, filling the role of Office and Finance Coordinator. We also had another addition to our staff, Mr. Richard Jackson, who is a former commissioner here. Mr. Richard Jackson joins us by way of Snyder Blake Staffing Agency. He is a temporary consultant who will help us in the capacity of policy support, and he will again also serve as some counsel on some things to help get the office moving in a forward direction. We have also been doing assistant director interviews, and the panel for our assistant director interviews has consisted of Commissioner Mason, Commissioner Zayed. We did ask Attorney Louis Smoot, who is our resident staff attorney, to sit in on these interviews, and we've also had Mr. Jackson to sit in on the interviews as well. We've held our first few interviews beginning yesterday, and we should be concluding those interviews next week. My goal is to have our assistant director onboarded by end of May of this year, and that will, bring us to a total of, I think, 5 staff members at that time.
To the chair, I just have a quick question, Shelley. Is it just one round of interviews with the panel, or are there multiple rounds?
No, it's just one round of interviews, and we are using a scoring rubric to score that interview and have some conversation on that. No? Oh, okay. Interesting. Mm. And so, as you guys know, we're trying to kind of phase in our staffing so that, the persons who are coming on board, they have an opportunity to get acclimated to their roles, and then we phase in some new people. After we do the assistant director, the hire next will be the community engagement coordinator positions, and my goal is to hire 2 of those persons. And so I would say by summertime, I want to say no later than June or July, we should be, at capacity and having the office more operationalized. Speaking of office, we have been looking for office leasing spaces. As you guys know, we've been here probably for the better part of 8-9 years now, and so I think our time here has possibly come to an end. Where it has been, I can't say the greatest adventure. We are certainly looking forward to seeking greener pastures. So far, I've been working with our Commissioner of Real Estate, who has forwarded me a couple of different properties to view, and the ones that I think would be most beneficial to our operational needs are the ones that you see listed here in the report, and that is the Link 59, which is on Euclid Avenue. The Eagles Food Building, it looked great in the pamphlet that was forwarded to me, but we will take a tour of that space to see just how beneficial it will be to our needs. And then there is a space at 55th and South Marginal. I think the building is called the Concentra Building, and so we'll be taking a tour of that building as well.
Question to the chair. And in terms of finances, is there a big question mark still on that, or because I know this building is fairly inexpensive? So
Correct. And so currently, our contract here consists of $38,000. We have $38,000 on the contract here, and the reason that we have so much on the contract here is because we were paying for the space on the 3rd floor. We no longer pay for that space on the 3rd floor, which will, in effect, at the end of this contract, which is over in October, it will leave a significant balance on this contract. And that is us having gone through this whole year, at the end of October, we will still have, quite a bit of money left on the contract that we still have. And that's without having touched the money that has been allocated for leasing for this year. And so currently we did get an uptick in the monies that have been allocated for our lease amount to $45,000. Leasing spaces that we're currently looking at start at about $55,000, which is not a far stretch. I've talked with our office, our budget person in the finance department, and he said, that could be easily accommodated. So I don't see the discrepancy being, too far out of the way for us to move into one of the spaces that have been listed here. Are there any other questions? Okay. And so everyone knows that we have been actively engaged in a federal court proceeding related to the proposed motion to terminate the consent decree. And this includes coordinating our outside counsel, Flannery and Georgalis. In order to continue and potentially expand their representation, I've spoken with Flannery and Georgalis, and he said that there would be some additional things that would be required for us to continue services with them, and that would include a new resolution. And so currently the resolution that we have on file with them is kind of narrow in scope, and if we're to continue with their services, they're requesting that we put together something that is either more expanded and more detailed, so that they know exactly how they're, representing us. Any questions? And so I said that I would sit down with our leadership so that we can begin kind of drafting what a new resolution would look like. And once that is drafted, of course, we would forward it to the full commission for review and approval. Officer records requests. Everyone knows that this has been an ongoing battle. As you can see, to date, 10 records have been requested, and to date, there have been 0 returns on those record requests. We have been working with the PAT team. We've been working with the monitor team. We've been working with, CDP. We have also engaged, again, Flannery and Georgalis, our outside legal counsel. We've been working with the law department on, this records request. Newly, we have also engaged the Office of Inspector General, and they are looking into the records request for us at this time. I've created a matrix of the records that we have requested, including the date that we've requested, the case number, and the outcome of those cases, so that the Office of Inspector General can, do a further review into what is going on. We will continue to work with the parties that I've listed above, and of course, making sure that we keep the commission updated on progresses that are being made with our records request. Currently, I'd like to give a big old shout out to Ms. Jocelyn Sandusky, our marketing and communications specialist. She is putting together our annual report. That annual report will be, it is currently complete. She's putting some final touches on it, and we should have a completed version that I think will be digital this year, and it will be forwarded to every commissioner and also made available on our website. We have set the date for April 30th of this year to have the annual report finalized and again available for our commissioners.
Is that something that we have to present, or we just post it on our site? Is it a report that we have to give out, or we just post it for the public to review at their leisure?
I think in past times we've just kind of handed it out and posted it on our website.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure, how the commission wants to present the report this
Oh no,
year.
I'm fine with it. I was just curious. Yeah, I'm like, is this a report we have to make? Okay, gotcha.
So I'd also like to say, when I first started here, I think my first month here, I had budget hearings. And when I entered into those budget hearings, I had already a budget that was prepared for me. The budget was based on last year's needs and expenses. And so, I just went and sat before council and I accepted the budget that was presented to me as is for this fiscal year. However, 3 months, almost 4 months now into my tenure, I am realizing that the budget that was presented in February is not sufficient for this office's needs. And so I am seeking to go back before council and request a 10% increase in the budgeted amount that we originally had set in February. Currently, I am reaching out to council members to see what a mid-year budget hearing might look like, and if we could, kind of gather council before they go out for recess or maybe sometime during the summer recess. I think it is imperative that we have our budget increase so, again, we can continue operationalizing this office. Additionally, you guys have been, there was a doodle poll sent out. We are planning a commissioner retreat, or the second half of the commission's retreat that you guys had when you first started. The retreat will focus on team building and strategic planning for 2026. I have begun doing some strategic planning. I will be reaching out to each one of the committee chairs to get your input on putting together the strategic plan for 2026. So look for my email or phone call to come your way. And also, if you would be so kind as to respond back to the doodle poll that was sent out so that we can, get a date that's going to be good for either late May or maybe in June to have the second half of our commissioners retreat. Speaking of professional development, you guys know that the Noble Conference is coming up in July. It will be set in Houston, Texas. I did send out some reminders about
I'm sorry, correction, it's going to be held in Dallas, Texas.
Dallas, Texas. Sorry about that. Dallas, Texas. In Dallas, Texas. So there have been some reminders set out for the Noble and the NACOL conference. I am forwarding and have forwarded names over to the finance person who's been helping us, Andre Reynolds, to put registration together for especially the Noble conference as it's coming up sooner than later. Currently, we have 2 commissioners who submitted their names, and I do know, co-chairs, that you submitted your name a couple of days ago, and so I'll, see if he can get your names added to the list, because we were trying to make sure that we got ahead of registration.
Yeah, it was an error. I submitted the names verbally, but not with the email, so that's why I went back and corrected with the email.
And NACOL is coming up in November, so if you're interested in going to the NACOL conference, please get your name submitted to me sooner than later. As you guys know, we may be in a right. And so whereas we've allowed whoever wanted to go to the NACOL and Noble conferences in the past time, just due to some of the circumstances that we're under this year, we may need to reduce the number of people who would like to attend so that we can, attend to some of our in-house matters. Case reviews, and I'm going to let we're convening case reviews and case hearings, but I'm going to let Commissioner Benito speak more and give you a more detailed update on case reviews and case hearings. And then I think that's all for my report. Like I said, you guys have been forwarded a copy of it, and so you can, take a look at your leisure to get a more detailed and thorough review.
Thank you for that report. Our next item on the agenda is our co-chair report given by Co-Chair Adams.
All right, good evening, everyone. Ooh, it's loud. Good evening, everyone. So I think a lot of things that I wanted to cover were covered by E.D. Williams, but just a few things. So I just want to remind everyone that to encourage you to check the disposition letters and charge letters folder that is on the OneDrive. So we've been uploading those as they come in. So they're usually uploaded weekly. And I think it's important because we need to keep as many eyes on the discipline of officers that's coming in. There are some matters that I think that deserve our attention that are coming in. And one of the things that, we're having meetings, but we're trying to figure out, again, how do we get involved in the discipline process sooner, so that we can kind of meet that 2-year window as we figure out this conflict between the CBA and the charter. I just say, just for example, there was a case, a serious case that came in just yesterday, and just doing the math of the timeline, this is a case that goes back to May of 2024, and we just received the disposition letter. Yeah, we just received the disposition, not the disposition, we received the charge letter this past Tuesday, and the discipline hearing will be held on the 28th. And with that type of timeline, the challenge that we're going to have if we want to honor that CBA is that essentially gives us only 2.5 weeks to receive all of the records and actually have a case hearing on it. So I just think it's important that we have as many eyes on these letters so that we can try to catch as many of these issues before we have an issue with the CBA, issue. We're saying that we can't impose this because that's the disagreement that we're having right now. Commissioner Kincaid?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, can you do me the favor of repeating that timeline again? What was the date of the incident?
The date of the incident was May 14th, 15th, 2024. And so they're just doing the actual hearing
Right.
on the 28th of 2026.
So may I ask a question?
Yeah.
And I could be completely wrong about this, but I thought, my understanding was that like, that 2-year window, I thought began for us once discipline was imposed, that we can't adjust the discipline, but it's from
No, the
the
clock
they
starts
are
once
notified
once
that
the
they
chief
have-
is notified. Like once the department becomes aware of a complaint is filed, that's when
Yeah.
the clock starts. Commissioner Benito?
Yeah. So there is no timeline for us specifically. There is a timeline under the collective bargaining agreement for how CDP must impose discipline. So they have a 2-year timeline from when the complaint must be found within 6 months of the incident
Right.
happening. So the investigation must start within 6 months, or the complaint must be filed within 6 months of the incident. As long as it happens within the 6 months of that incident, at that point, they have a 2-year window of when they became aware of the incident. So whether that the chief became aware to impose the discipline. So we will be talking in our accountability committee report about, to your point, how does that impact us? We don't have a separate timeline. There's just a timeline of discipline from in the collective bargaining agreement. Commissioner Chur, am I understanding that correctly, that those timelines?
Yeah, as far as I recall, that would be the timeline.
And so, I'm sorry, so there are specifics around the timeline to adjust that discipline, or does it strictly fall under discipline in
Right.
general
So-
must be imposed within that, or by the deadline of that 2-year time
Well,
frame?
this is why we keep saying that we have a conflict with the CBA.
Right.
Because,
No, I understand
because
that.
we are not limited by the charter. The counter argument for us doing discipline later is the city's stance is that they have to honor the collective bargaining agreement, even if it's in conflict with the charter. And so this is an example of taking almost that entire time to actually hear the case and discipline on it, and then we're kind of stuck with not having enough time to actually do the review, even if we are going to try to meet that 2-year window, even though we feel that we should be able to do the discipline, but the pushback we're getting is that the 2 years have expired. So we're still trying to work within it until we can get some type of resolution on this conflict between the CBA, but
And that only applies to cases where we feel the need to adjust the discipline, right? Like, what if the discipline is sufficient and we don't have to do anything with it?
Well, we won't know that unless we review it. Right, yeah, but, so I just, so I was, it's a, you know, looking at those dates, I was like, this is sort of a problem, right? And so I just wanted to alert everyone that those type of things are occurring where, because if, say for example, because we've already asked to get the records when they have a pre-disciplinary hearing, because at that point they've done enough of their investigation where they're actually having a hearing on what the discipline for the officer will be. But we're being told that we cannot receive the records when they issue the charge letter. They're telling us that we can't get them until they actually do the discipline. So one of the things that we were trying to address was one of the concerns of commissioners and concerns of the department, which was we're trying to like parallel track what we might do with what they may do, so that there's not this lag in time between when they give out their discipline and if we are going to change something. We're not really getting cooperation on it. And so the other part of this, say for example, the officer's discipline on the 28th, whatever they'll discipline an officer with, then we make the records request because they won't honor the records request beforehand. And now there's a 21-day window that they have, which is the court-ordered agreement on like how long between when we request a record and when they're supposed to fill it. But that 21-day agreement is still not being met as well. So you would then have to add 21 days onto the 28th, and then by that time, it's past the 2 years. Right. So we're trying to figure it out, but as we're trying to settle this issue, I think that we have to try to identify cases that are still falling within that CBA window right now, because we don't have any resolution on it. We're just saying, you know, that there's a conflict between what the charter, the authority that we're given by the charter and the authority, the agreement they have with the CBA. So I was just trying to just use that as an example to kind of just show how, and you know, we don't know if it's intentional. We don't know if the investigation just took longer. We don't know what the circumstances are, but what we do know is that we're being put in a situation that some cases that we might need to review, we're not being able to review them right, because it's like you used the whole 2 years. And so if we need to review something, then you're going to come back and say, well, you took too much time, but we didn't take too much time because we just got the case in 2 years. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. But I would say it's really simple. Like, all I do is when those disposition or charge letters come in, I just read them. And if I feel like it's something that we maybe need to look at, I just shoot Shelley an email and say, hey, with the actual disposition or charge letter, and say, hey, can you just request the records? And she'll request the records. Commissioner Mason, you want to say something?
Chair, is there something that we have addressed with legal, the conflict between the timeline with the union and what our time is or time is not? Because there is a conflict, and legal should be able to give us some answer on that, how that fit in, how we fit into that timeline.
I think we've addressed this several times. I think that that this is part of the audits that we've requested from the Inspector General, where we're trying to figure out if this incident happened in May of 2024, why is it not actually being heard for a discipline hearing until April of 2026? So we don't know what is happening that is taking so much time, but we're trying to work with the IG through her auditing, authority to figure out why there's such a long lag between when the incidents are happening and then eventually when they're actually having these charge letters and discipline hearings.
And through the chair, if I could address Commissioner Mason. And so I have sent a letter out to our email to Mark Griffin and also DC Slot, requesting a meeting with them to do just that. One of the things that we're finding is also creating a bottleneck, if you will, is we're trying to, when we request the record, I would like to request a record when the case is deemed closed. And so right now, we're trying to define when a case is deemed closed. For us, excuse me, for us, a case is deemed closed at the end of that investigation. That would allow us time enough, if they sent that record over at the end of that investigation, to get in front of the CBA conflict. And so that is the reason that I've requested the meeting with, again, Mark Griffin and Dishi Slot. That has been now probably a week ago. I've not yet received any response from either of them. And so I'll send another reminder email so that we can sit down and kind of hammer out when it is that we can request these records.
And also the clarification on the timeline.
Yes,
with the
yeah.
conflict.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, Commissioner Kincaid.
I have one last thing, and this isn't something that we have to discuss any further. What I'm about to say, we don't have to discuss it any further now, but I would, to my accountability chair, ask that, and I will be at our next accountability meeting, okay? So don't look at me like that. If we can add it to our agenda to have a little bit more of a robust conversation focused on the collective bargaining agreement and kind of understanding it a little better during that accountability meeting. But also, my other, I guess, hypothetical question is that, so the CBA and the city, the agreement, right, the collective bargaining agreement is between the union and the department, right? So let's just,
And the city.
well, yeah, well, the department is the city, right? So let's just say there is discipline that we do have to impose after the so-called window in the CBA. At that point, wouldn't it just be a matter of the union to attempt to fight it? And we can still impose our discipline and let the union attempt to fight it as they will, but that doesn't really have anything to do with our effectiveness in imposing the discipline that we see fit.
I mean, I think, to the commissioner, I think that that's something that we have to decide if that's what we're going to do. I mean, I think the obvious is that that's going to trigger a lawsuit. And so, I mean, that's just the obvious, but I'm in agreement with you, because I just feel that if we're acting in good faith and we're trying to work together, that you can't take up the entire 2-year time frame and then not allow us to do our job. I think we should be given more time. So I think the discussion could be, you know, if we just want to continue just to say this is our authority and we're going to use it, and then that's going to trigger probably a lawsuit, or if we could maybe have 2 conversations at the same time, where we might want to propose that if this is the pattern and this is how long it takes for the division to complete their investigations, then perhaps we need to extend that time frame in the collective bargaining agreement.
Well, I think the other consideration is that it very well may be tactical on the part of the union, understanding that this is
Right.
the trend, and it makes sense for them to be tactical in that way. To say,
Right.
okay, it's gonna take them 2 years to do this, right? And I'm just saying,
City should be
yeah,
Right.
and so I think it's one of those hypotheticals that, you know, to my previous point, and again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to harp on the issues.
No, it's an important issue, though.
And again, if it's preferred, we can have a more robust conversation during our accountability meeting. So I yield, I'm sorry. Please continue.
Mr. True, you going to say something?
Yes, to the chair, can you describe some of the facts of this case, or exactly what it might entail?
This particular case, there's 2 of them that they involve allegations sexual assault of a female citizen from male officers.
Okay, that makes sense. It could take some time for an
Right.
investigation like that to take that long.
But there's others that don't fall under that. That's why I say that's why I'm saying I think that we've been receiving a lot of charge and disposition letters. I think that commissioners should be reading, because we're seeing some pretty serious things come up in a lot of these recent hearings.
To the chair, there
Yes.
was no criminal actions taken?
We just got the charge letter, because they're going to have the discipline hearing on the 28th for this particular case, and so this is why we're requesting the records, because we don't have anything but a charge letter. So we don't know the details of
Some
our,
type of sexual assault, believe there's a criminal action
Yeah.
that's going to follow suit. So there are some things that are lacking. And the other thing, if we can request a copy of their contract, union contract.
we have it.
Ain't nobody showed it us.
It's on the, there's a, if you guys go on the SharePoint drive that we share with everyone, there's a folder on there that says, I think that says contract or union contract, but we have them. They're on that website.
Okay.
On the
But
SharePoint.
It's gonna have some criminal action if there was a
Yeah.
sexual assault.
I would assume so, but we just don't know because we don't have anything but a charge letter. So we did request the records though. Need someone else?
I want to add something. And I just want to add to the point of Co-Chair Adams and some things you brought up. We did attempt to have for the CPC to have made attempts for the CPC to have a seat at the table during the last CBA negotiations, but we were unable to. So I think that would have, kind of helped with some of these issues, but for whatever reasons, we just weren't able to. So I think in the future, that should also be considered.
I mean, I just think that the union gonna fight whatever decision we
Right.
make, whether it's 2 days or 2 years, they gonna try to fight it. anyway.
Exactly,
So we might as
exactly.
well make a
Yeah.
decision.
Right.
I agree.
Any other comments on that? I just want to just remind us that you do have access to those letters as they come in, so we'll just keep uploading them. And so I did send another email out with the link to that SharePoint drive, that OneDrive folder. And I think the other thing that I wanted, because E.D. Williams covered some things that I wanted to discuss. I do, just to reiterate what she stated, I'm going to just, I think she already talked about the annual report, that we're close to finishing that. But in terms of these, for 2026, since I think I just sent a request to make 3 more records requests in the past couple of days, but before those requests, we've made 10 records requests. One records request was simply, can we have the disposition letter for a case that you've already settled and disciplined an officer on? And that was sent on March 9th. And we got an immediate response that we will receive the disposition letter, but we still don't have it. So as of right now, I'm not sure what's going on, but we're not receiving any records right now. We've made 10 records requests, like I said, one of which was simply give us a disposition letter, and we have not received that one disposition letter. So we definitely are having an issue with receiving records. I think the last time we spoke, I don't remember the exact date, but we were told that the records that we requested were now with the law department. And so we haven't heard anything about an update. We followed up. So I just want to make you aware that right now we're previously we were in a situation where we would eventually get records, but they just came in really slow. But right now we're just not. We haven't received records in 2026. Yeah. So I just want to just bring that to the commissioner's attention. And then I think the other 2 things that I had listed were covered by E.D. Williams. So I'll just yield at this point. That will be our report.
Thank you. We're going to move on to the committee status reports, and we're going to start with Commissioner Kincaid.
Okay. Hi, everybody. I am going to be uncharacteristically brief. Y'all know I can talk, okay? So the one major thing that I want to share from the outreach committee specifically is that on Saturday, this upcoming Saturday, April 25th, 2026 at 10 a.m., we are going to have yet another panel-style discussion that will include 2 members of our sister board, CPRB. I mess that acronym up every single time. One of our commissioners, Tara Coleman, and then the Inspector General, Shailene Agrawal. So that conversation is going to be slightly different than the one that we had in the more community-focused forum. This is going to be very, very much information-based, information-centered. I've been working on drafting that conversation for a few days now, so I'm very excited about it. And the location of that will be at 3100 East 45th Street. There is a flyer. I don't know if you all got it, but I will make sure I send it. It is also posted to our website. Yes. It should be posted on our website and our social media pages. So if you are interested, we would love to see you there. And then other than that, we did postpone our meeting this month because it fell on the Easter holiday and we didn't reschedule it, but we will have our standing meeting at the beginning of the coming month. I'm sorry. Oh, yes. Okay. So I actually have a question for you, Executive Director. Was the information that we successfully collected passed along to the monitor and to the federal judge, Judge Solomon Oliver?
And so I do know, through the chair, that it was passed on to Monitor Christine Cole. And, you know, of course, we collected it all to be passed on to Judge Solomon Oliver, but we did pass it on to Monitor Cole.
And so can you also, I'm actually very happy about this, but can you give me the final number of responses that we received, or do you know what the final?
I believe the final number was 458 responses that we collected in just a little over a week. And so that was pretty stellar. And we can share the link with each of the commissioners so they can take a look at the survey for themselves as well.
I just want to clarify that I was actually very excited about that. It was a collective effort to write the survey, and the survey was in response to Judge Solomon Oliver simply stating that the major voice that he has not heard in regard to the consent decree conversation was the voice of the community itself. So we did put together a survey that had some demographical information and then some very scale-based questions around how much people know about the consent decree, how they feel about it, their interactions with police, their thoughts around policing in their neighborhoods, and what their individual relationship to the city of Cleveland is. And as Executive Director just stated, we were able to get over 400 responses, which I think is a really great push. So that makes me very excited for our future larger scale survey that we are also going to discuss with the collaborating with the monitor on. And I think that's it for outreach until our next meeting. Yes, sir.
Yeah, two questions. One related to the survey. Is there a sense of what the survey told us, or like what the findings are of that, or not
So
yet?
that data I have not been a part of quantifying. So Jocelyn and Shelley have been working on actually sorting through the survey and looking through it. So Shelley, if you have a response to that.
Yeah, so it was kind of it was a mixed bag. In some instances, we had people who felt that the consent decree should be terminated. And in other instances, there were people who felt that officers still needed to have the consent decree here. So it was kind of 50-50, if you will. Yeah, I was a little surprised, but it was kind of 50-50. But again, I will share the link with you so you can, take a look at the data for yourself. But overall, I think the sentiment that came out of the survey is that we still need to have the consent decree here, at least until everyone has a good sense of what it is, and the oversight bodies that are involved in the reform process are up and running.
And I think I'd certainly want to point out that we absolutely made the survey non-biased and not leading in any way. I really wanted it to feel like exactly what it was supposed to be. I did not want to taint it with an agenda. Obviously, that we are the CPC, and we, I believe as a body, but as individuals, have our own feelings about whether or not the consent decree should go. And I did not want to taint this survey with that, because I I believe that the most ethical thing to do was get the genuine response of those who are engaged enough to respond at all. So I had a feeling genuinely that it would be kind of divided, either between people who do not know what the consent decree is at all, which I think is a charge for us and our sister body, our other oversight body, as well as the city. But it highlights for me that information is necessary, and if we have a part to play in administering the information that people need from a non-biased standpoint, I think that we should make a more robust effort to do so. And then the next thing, okay.
No, just a quick, did you end up attending, because it seems like you've been doing a lot in the community, did you attend that Spring into Democracy event?
No.
You weren't able to?
No, I wasn't.
Okay.
And I did email, tell me her name again.
Leak?
Leak, yes. Leak did email me and give me an idea of what the conversation would be about, but I was not able to make it. I also wasn't able to make it on the same day to the conversation that the mayor had at City Hall so I'm sorry. but-
No need to apologize.
Yeah, I wasn't
Curious
able.
How it went, because I was invited and I couldn't go either, so.
Do I just continue to, okay. And so I am also going to share my colleague Tara Coleman's report. She is the chair of the Rules Committee. I believe that she shared her report with each of you, but I'll just read it through. So the rules report is as follows. The Rules Committee has undertaken an effort to receive feedback from all commissioners and the CPC's executive director on requests or recommendation for changes to the CPC's internal operational rules. The committee last met on April 14th to discuss the handling of the received feedback and implementation of any rule changes. Currently, there are 3 main rules of focus that will necessitate review and/or change to approximately 3 to 5 other additional rules, if not more, and will incorporate those issues raised by entirely new rules proposed by any commissioner. The 3 main rules covering or related to all received feedback are leadership, or 1.4.4 leadership, 1.4.5 committees, 1.7.8 meeting attendance and participation. So it is my understanding that each of these categories was assigned to the individuals that make up the Rules Committee. So Commissioner Coleman, leadership, committees to Co-Chair Zayed, and meeting attendance and participation to Commissioner Van Leer. Each committee member has been assigned 1 rule of focus with the following tasks. 1, preparing the best recommendation for where and how to implement requested changes and ensure the concepts and concerns discussed by the committee are addressed therein, specifically cross-checking the rules of focus against other related rules. Pre-identified by the committee at the April 14th meeting, and preparing the best recommendation for how to address any impact or changes to those related rules, and reviewing the manual of operations in its entirety for impact on other rules and preparing any recommendations as necessary to address them. These recommendations for each committee member are to be finalized and discussed at the next Rules Committee meeting to be held on May 12th at 6:30 p.m. here in our office.
Thank you. We're going to move forward with the Police Accountability Committee update given by the chair of that committee, Commissioner Chandra Marrero Benito.
Thank you. Good evening, everybody. So I sent out, and also we have printed a kind of draft process for a collaborative discipline review. So as was already discussed earlier in the meeting, one of the issues that we have seen in thinking about how do we utilize our charter mandated authority as the final say on police discipline, given the constraints of the collective bargaining agreement that says that discipline must be issued within 2 years, and also given some of the other factors at play, including issues with records requests, issues with timing of when some of these decisions are being made by CDP, and also I think some different feelings that commissioners have about what's fair in terms of if you're issued discipline and then years later the commission comes in and makes changes to that discipline, that process feeling less fair. So taking all of that into account, what we have been discussing in the accountability committee is what would a process look like where the CPC was involved in the front end. So as discipline was being given, or immediately following discipline being given, what would that process look like? So we have been working as a committee and developing kind of a proposed process that I wanted to share with you kind of where we are in our draft brainstorm of that process. We're also kind of doing this hand in hand with the development of the finalization of the corrective action policy. So you're going to hear from our colleague, Commissioner Van Leer tonight on with where we are in the draft of the corrective action policy. So we are trying to integrate elements of this process into that policy, and so all of this is interconnected, and so we're trying to address things from multiple standpoints. But I wanted to walk us through this, and I just wanted to create a space for some discussion about whether we feel like as a commission, do we feel like this is the right approach? Are we on the right track? This is the beginning of the process. This is not a finalized policy. This is just a kind of a draft process that we could use, that we still have a number of steps to move forward to actually implement this. So kind of as I discussed, it's about getting in on the front end. So what this would look like was our expectation would be on the conclusion of the pre-disciplinary process, the CDP would engage in a collaborative discipline review process with us. One of the things is all pre-disciplinary hearings will be video recorded by CDP and would be sent to the CPC or the accountability committee along with the full investigative file. You know, some of the brainstorming, 48 hours, but when we kind of have a formal policy, we will have timelines, we will work that out so that there is structure, but we would then, before discipline is even given out, we would receive a package that had a video footage of the disciplinary hearing and the full investigative file. At the same time, and Commissioner Van Leer will speak a little bit more about this, but we've been talking with the Black Shield and the Hispanic Police Officers Association about how to make sure that they have a greater voice at the table, as these are police organizations in the city of Cleveland that have been working hard to promote fairness and consistency for officers and equality, and so we want them to make sure that they have a voice at the table. And also we received some pushback in the corrective action policy about we had created a fairness and consistency policy. So we've been talking to stakeholders, talking with the members of those unions about what would we do instead of that committee. And Commissioner Van Leer will get into this. But so integrated into this process, what we'll talk about a little bit later when we talk about that policy, is that the Black Shield and the HPOA would submit to us in writing any recommendations or statements that they made to the chief or the public safety director regarding the fairness and consistency of the discipline. And then also included that the FOP and CPPA would also be welcome to submit to us in writing any recommendations or statements regarding the fairness and consistency of the discipline. And then once the chief or the public safety director had a draft of the disposition letter, so the disposition letter is essentially the letter that they send out that says this is the discipline that we're issuing. So once they had a draft of that letter, they would send it to the CPC Accountability Committee. Then we would set a specific timeline. Again, this is all in draft and brainstorm process, but I imagine so far, something like a 2-week deadline we would have to meet once we had that letter, draft disposition letter. We would meet, we would review, the committee members would be responsible for reviewing the materials, reviewing the case file, reviewing the hearing footage, reviewing all the statements from the unions and the police organizations, reviewing the discipline letter, and then we would meet and we would look at it to evaluate what the chief or the public safety director is recommending, and we would essentially evaluate it for, is this consistent with the corrective action policy and the disciplinary matrix? Is it consistent with what other officers have been disciplined for those same violations? And is the discipline fair? Based on our review of that, the committee would either vote to say, we agree with this discipline, we would let the chief or public safety director know, or we would say to them, we would make a recommendation of, we think that this needs to be changed, and this is our evaluation of that. Then the chief or public safety director would then need to submit either an amended discipline letter or submit in writing a statement explaining why they decided not to change the discipline. At that point, the committee would review that and vote either to approve the discipline or to send a referral to the full commission for an evidentiary hearing. And so then at that point, it would come to this body to review and discuss whether we should hold an evidentiary hearing. So, so then should the CPC vote against an evidentiary hearing, the chief's recommendation would stand. If the commission voted to hold an evidentiary hearing, we would then go through the evidentiary hearing process. So that is kind of where we're at in terms of thinking about this is what a collaborative kind of preemptive process could look like. I think that my questions for the commission are, A, do we agree with this as, do we agree with this concept of getting in on the front end, or this concept of engaging in a collaborative process with CDP? Are we in agreement with that as our strategy and what we think is the best way to enact our charter mandated authority? So that's my first question for discussion. And the second is, are there any general thoughts about kind of the process we've been drafting out so far? I wasn't sure. Do I acknowledge people or do you? Okay, sorry.
Hi, through the chair. Again, sorry I missed the meeting because we could have had this conversation there. So my apologies, genuinely. So I guess my major concern with that is to a degree a capacity issue. Because, so I guess my ideology would be a little more tightly wound, like filtering around that, like maybe cases of a certain gravity that we would take that type of position, but to hear and review and have a input on every single like disposition, no matter what it's about, seems like a huge load for just this body to take on. But also, in my opinion, it kind of diminishes the idea of any level of trust that we have that the department is going to do their job, right? This is their job to do and in the event that there is something that we feel is not correct, right, then we step in and say, no, absolutely not, right? But I think on a general basis, if we are fostering relationship and trust, then maybe, we have to let them do their job and filter where we are like, maybe this requires a little more oversight because the gravity of this offense is crazy and we want to make sure it's carried out appropriately, right? But like every single one, I don't think we should necessarily be involved at that depth.
To the chair and to Commissioner Kincaid, our policy assistant, Mr. Jackson, actually spoke to how we could bifurcate. For example, he mentioned in our meeting that, there are certain things that just wouldn't be on that radar. For example, uniform violations and other things. But if he, to the committee chair and to the commission, maybe we could let Mr. Jackson speak to that. Is that, yeah, because he really sort of nailed it for us.
Thank you to the chair, to Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. To the chair and to Commissioner Kincaid, thank you all for allowing me to speak. The issue of the discipline and capacity was one of the things that was on our minds when we were drafting this particular GPO. As I spoke at the Accountability Committee, there were some things where we can build expediency in the disciplinary process for things like tardiness or uniform violations. Those things are very quick. They can be handled very quickly. And it's not an issue really of whether or not of trust. It's an issue of process so that we can catch things that may have gotten overlooked that the public would not have known about until way later when there's nothing you could do. Or even if you did do something, could cause further problems. So what we're trying to build is a process so that we can catch things on a regular basis. That being the case, once these things are implemented, the amount of charging should go down because the current amount is about 500 to 600 officers are being put up on charges every year of the 1,100 officers that are assigned. So if you have a department where you're charging or saying that there's misconduct by half your workforce, there's either something wrong with the policy, something wrong with the training, or something wrong with the leadership. But at some point, we have to be able to identify these things, so we need a process to do that. And so that's what this is that process to identify those things. And we do actually have the capacity, because if we're at the beginning of it, just like everyone else in this process, when you see the disciplinary letters or the charge letters, you see a whole list of people on that list. Those people are at the charging portion of it so that they get all of the information that you're supposed to be getting. And you get that information, then you can see from at the beginning of it, before discipline is imposed, if the right discipline will be imposed. That way you can do all this stuff before the officer receives harm. Because if you allow the officer to receive discipline and it's imposed and it looks like it may either be not enough for what the charge was or too much for what the charge was, and then it's too late you can't go back and fix that, So that's one of the things that we were looking at with this whole policy to get ahead of it. Ma'am.
Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner Kincaid. I think another thing that, again, we are still in the process of developing this, but one thing that we discussed and could absolutely be implemented is we could decide in the new corrective action policy, there are there's 5 categories of discipline. There's undisciplined violations, which is what Sergeant Jackson was discussing. That part of what this policy does is makes it so that some of the lower level infractions, uniform, tardiness, those kinds of things, they're just a automatic, you get a letter that said, hey, this was a violation. And so there's the undisciplined category, and then there's groups 1, 2, and 3, and 4. So one thing that we could do is to address the capacity issue, and also I think that what we don't want to do is we don't want to bog the system down unnecessarily. That's why we want to develop this in a cooperative, collaborative way. So one thing we could do is we could decide of these 4 groups, do we want to only view cases, only engage this process with group 3 and 4? It's probably kind of what I would imagine, but I think there's absolutely room for us to do that as well.
One more question based on that statistic that you just shared in regard to the 600 potential disciplines a year. Do we have statistics on what category those disciplines fall in? Like, how, do you understand what I'm asking? Like, of the 600, how many of those annually are level 4 and level 3 violations? Like, do we have a statistic on that?
To the commissioner, I think that's part of what we would like to accomplish through the process. So we on Monday we talked about getting data. We don't have enough data. We need to know, for example, the charge and disposition letters don't identify wards, right? We need to know if it's Ward 1 through 5, and then we need to see sort of like how that is panning out. And I think what I would caution, and I hear what you're saying about capacity and getting bogged down, but what I would be okay with, where I am now with, the group 1 and the minor stuff like uniforms and things like that. Like, yeah, we don't need to be really like focusing too much energy on that. But I wouldn't want to dismiss group 2s. And the reason why I say I wouldn't want to dismiss group 2s, because what we also see in some of these letters is that sometimes they undercharge the officer. So if I've seen letters where the officer is undercharged, so a group 3 is reduced to a group 2, and if we don't look at those, we may not catch it. So we have an instance I can think of where an officer used very, very discriminatory and biased and hateful language against someone, and instead of charging that officer, what they charged the officer with was a group 2 violation, which is like verbal misconduct. But what they should have charged the officer was discrimination and bias, right, which is the group 3. Well, that would be group 4 in like the new matrix, but under the current policy, that maybe should have been charged as a group 3, but it was charged as a group 2. So, I wouldn't want to just completely dismiss group 2s, because sometimes the officers are undercharged, and we might decide that maybe we need to, bring it to like the next level.
To a question with respect to that. I know our role is to review the discipline. How are we impacted, and how can we respond if the person is undercharged? For example, I know in court, we plea bargain, person may get 18 months on a particular political incident, but no one can then go back and recharge the person. We can only review if we went to the Court of Appeals, they could remand, we review the sentence, but we couldn't review the charge. So I'm just how does that fit in with our disciplinary matrix as opposed to the charging matrix?
Yeah.
Commissioner Vito, you want to answer that?
So generally, what happens is IA or OPS will, in the kind of investigative packet in the charge letter, will determine what the charges were, and then in the disposition letter, the chief or the public safety director will sometimes reduce those charges or increase those charges based on what they see. And so I think that how that would be addressed is if we got an investigation packet and upon reviewing it, we said we actually disagree with this as a charge, as this charge, our recommendation would be this charge should be, the charge of a group 4 violation should be sustained. And that's kind of how we would do it. So there's not, the charges, it's not substantially changed. It just, basically the charge is determining where it fits in the matrix. And so that would be something that the CPC would have the ability to increase or decrease or make recommendations around.
And to the commissioner, I think that's sort of the point of what the process that Commissioner Benito described, because what would happen is that before any final discipline is, administered, there would be a collaborative process where we would get to see what the chief or what the safety director are going, the direction that they're leaning in. That panel would then get to review, and then that panel would say, hey, we agree, this is matching with the discipline matrix, or that committee might say, no, we think you overcharged this officer, or we think you undercharged the officer, and then the chief or the safety director would then review that, and then they would basically, it goes through that process. So I think this process is meant to avoid exactly what your concern is, because I know that, when we were looking at our first case, that was a big concern of a lot of commissioners, was that we want to make sure that our officer's not disciplined and then disciplined again. And we just, so this is, I think, trying to come at some type of, some type of meeting point where we're respecting the authority of the chief and the safety director, but we also want to be engaged and involved in a way where, in an ideal world, it might reduce the number of evidentiary hearings that we might actually have to have, because we have already kind of got involved on the front end. So I think, Commissioner Nelson, one of the goals of the process is to prevent exactly what you're talking about.
And I would agree. And as we talked in the Monday meeting, it to me, it just makes sense for us to have this collaboration. It would protect the officers. It would expedite the process, and I think it would ensure a more fair disposition of any discipline up front, and I can see that being the benefit. That's a major benefit of this, and I hope the rank and file at some point gets to hear about this, even if it's through back channels, because this appears would be beneficial to them.
So I want to thank you guys for the discussion. Our next meeting will be on Monday, May 11th. Yes. And we will continue working on this and setting out next steps. So if anybody is interested, any commissioners or members of the public are interested in joining the conversation, we welcome you to our next meeting. We will, if there are any questions in between now and then, I was going to say you can reach out to me, but I will be going on vacation. So anyway, so I'll see you at the meeting.
All right.
But
Thank you.
the second item on our agenda is also referenced in our earlier conversation, is that we have some questions about how do we engage in potential evidentiary hearings, which is, again, the process through which we would impose new discipline on cases that are outside the time frame for the imposition of discipline laid out in the collective bargaining agreement. Again, there's a few different ways in which that's impacted. One is just potentially the normal length of investigations could run out the clock on that. We also have some concerns about could there be intentional ways that the clock could be run out. And our concerns about general conflict between the collective bargaining agreement and the charter in terms of what the charter mandates our authority as and what is in the collective bargaining agreement. So we feel like at this point we need to engage legal counsel before we hear our next case and before we hear cases so that we can be fully prepared to engage in that in a strategic way that I think, Commissioner Kincaid made a great point of, the feeling of we have this authority and if whatever they're going to do, they're going to do. Yeah. I think it's a great point. And also, we want to protect the authority of the commission from any potential threats that could come through litigation and making sure that we go into any potential litigation understanding what we're doing and what the arguments are and how do we engage in this process in the best way to ensure that we protect the authority that our community members and the citizens voted for and fought for and in some cases died for. So based on that, I'm making a motion to engage our legal counsel, Flannery Georgalis, on the matter of our evidentiary hearing process and discipline cases coming before the commission.
Is there a second?
I'll second
Discussion?
I have unreadiness on this matter. Can you articulate the difference between the hearing process, unless I'm misunderstanding what you're saying? Are the prosecution of these cases usually occurs through the in the past through our executive director who was a lawyer, or through I think the executive director now is bringing on a lawyer. So are you saying you want to hire outside counsel to conduct our evidentiary hearings? Okay, let me make sure I got that clear. Or are you saying in case there's a lawsuit, because right now the city law department represents all commissions, period, on any litigation involving any of its standing commissions, boards, etc. So explain to me a little bit better what you're moving.
And so if I could just kind of jump in there. So right now, currently, there's a case that's been pending for about 3 years, right? And we all know that the Tolbert case has been, as a matter of fact, I actually took the initial complaint for the Tolbert case 3 years ago. That case is currently sitting on my desk right now, waiting to still be heard. Because the timeline, the case has just been, it's been timed out. It's 3 years old now. If we were to hear that case, it could potentially trigger a lawsuit against the commission. Commissioner Kincaid. Right. So, in order to protect this commission, what I would recommend is to consult with our counsel before walking into a lawsuit without a strategic plan as to how to go through that case, or even if that case, is a case that we should consider to be heard. Of course, that would be at the commission's discretion, but we certainly would need some legal counsel around how to navigate such cases that are timed out.
You had a question. Someone else had a question. I'll come back to my questions.
Commissioner Kincaid.
My question may be answered.
So this actually goes back to my original question and discussion around this, because I just want to clarify a couple of points. If we hear a case that is beyond the collective bargaining agreement's standard, that is not the city of Cleveland's standard. They did not limit us at all. The city of Cleveland in the charter gives us no limits, right? The collective bargaining agreement that doesn't acknowledge us at all, by the way, doesn't acknowledge us at all. So that's a bigger issue that I have personally, that we're not even acknowledged in it as a part of the discipline process, but I digress on that point. The collective bargaining agreement, the union could then come against the decision that we make. But when we make that decision, when we say, I was about to say something out of turn. When we make a decision, whatever that will be, to discipline the officer in this case, it is a final decision as far as, now hear me out if I'm understanding this correctly, as far as the city of Cleveland, the Department of Police, and the charter that we operate under is concerned. If we make a decision in regard to that, that's what it is. And then the union will then have to push back against the city for the decision that we are lawfully allowed to make, right? So the issue will be between the union and the city of Cleveland at that point. No?
Yes and no. We are part of the city structure.
Yes.
But remember that settlement agreement. That settlement agreement was signed by the law director and the union. So the city is taking a stance that the collective bargaining agreement essentially supersedes the charter. So you're right in what you're saying, but what we're seeing in practice is that the legal department that is should be representing us has taken us a public stance that they are going to honor the CBA because they've essentially told us that that they're entering into these settlement agreements with officers because of the CBA and basically telling us that like we're timed out. So this is why we're asking to consult the outside counsel because the city's legal counsel, the law department who's supposed to represent us, they've already kind of taken a position that is adverse to the what you're saying, which is, well, we have our authority, and the city's not saying, well, the charter says this, so even if it's after the 2 years of the CBA, we have to honor, their authority. They're taking actually the opposite stance. They're actually siding with the CBA. So I think that's why E.D. Williams is asking that we consult the outside counsel because the city has taken a position that doesn't support us using the authority that the charter has given us after that 2-year window in the CBA.
So to clarify, this has happened already?
Yeah.
The person got paid, so it leaves us hanging out there.
So,
yeah, this has already happened.
So I know that we have the settlement situation, right? But the settlement was because of timing?
Yeah, so the law department and the city's stance on it is that the settlement agreement was like sort of this good faith collaboration because the 2-year window of the CBA had expired. So they didn't take the stance that, well, we do have a CBA, but the charter gives them authority that doesn't have time restrictions on them. That's not the stance that they're taking. So I think that this is why we feel like we need to consult the outside counsel because the city has already taken a position that is not in step with just respecting the authority that we're given in a charter that doesn't have time restrictions on it.
And just to clear, and again, I'm asking questions to clarify this for myself. So in regard to the situation where there was a settlement presented and there was a collaboration between the law department and the union to come up with this settlement in regard to a case timing out, was this a situation where we, the commission, felt like we would have imposed different discipline or we wanted to see different discipline?
I
Yes.
think that that particular case would have been more than a 5-day suspension.
Okay. And so that would have been a situation where we would have wanted to do something different, and because of the agreement that they made, it gave the impression that we could not make a different decision.
Correct.
But could we have just gone ahead and made a different decision and let that? So I guess my eternal stance on this is let's make a different decision and see what happens.
Commissioner Benito?
And I yield.
I'm with you all the way. And the reason why I want us to talk to legal counsel is how do we take that stance in the most effective, strategic way? And so it's not, I could see a world in which the attorney comes back and says the same thing that you just said. I could also see a world in which an attorney comes back and says, well, maybe try this or take this different approach so that we can engage in this in the way that best protects the authority given to the commission. Because what would be bad is if there was a lawsuit that created precedents that diminished our authority. And so that is what we are trying to prevent. Are there ways that we should engage in this and approach this to make sure that whatever lawsuit is, let's be real, probably going to come, right? How do we make sure that we start it in the strongest position?
Okay, I lied. I got one more thing to say. This is it, and I mean it. Have we considered, before engaging our outside legal counsel, consulting the attorneys that sit on our board?
Well, let me respond to that. One of the things that, well, let me say this. One of the things that we probably would be reluctant to do, because the attorney who serves himself as his own client is a fool. I would think that the first stop in this is to get a definitive response from our law department, who is our lawyer. They are our lawyer. Outside counsel is employed when there's a conflict. So we have to drive the conflict. Now, the position that they support the collective bargaining agreement is because they negotiated the collective bargaining agreement. So the city and the union, on behalf of the city of Cleveland and all its citizens, negotiated a collective bargaining agreement. The parties signed the collective bargaining agreement. And as the judge said, as it relates to the consent decree, the parties are the city and the Department of Justice. Right. Period. Those are the only parties. Those are the only parties to the consent decree. Only parties to the collective bargaining agreement, CPPA, and the city of Cleveland. So I'm not speaking for Attorney Coleman. I'm just speaking for myself that I will rely on our lawyer. And then if it becomes an apparent conflict, then we have to consider, but we first have to be in the conflict. Now I understand what Commissioner Coleman, Commissioner Benito is saying, is she like to consult with outside counsel. Well, yes, I don't have objection to consulting with outside counsel, but outside counsel will not be able to represent us until there is, and it can't be a self-serving. You know, outside counsel say, yeah, that's a conflict, obviously, because that's how you drum up business. Right. So there'd have to be a real narrow discussion about trying to, but my first stop would be to talk to the counsel who represents all of us.
I just want to follow up to the commissioner. I believe that we have what you're asking for in writing. I think that this was addressed in the settlement agreement that we discovered when we were at NACO. So I'll search for that correspondence from the law director, and I'll go back and comb over that settlement agreement, and I will send that out to the commissioners. But I believe that we already have a statement from the law director that basically states that that the time frame pretty much ran out, and that this was the best they can do. That the officer didn't have to agree to the discipline, but the officer did in good faith. So I think we can get that information to you, because I believe we already have it.
I think this is also a more robust conversation that we could potentially have and add to our accountability agenda, because I still have more questions and I keep lying saying I'm not going to say nothing else.
With respect to just to this discussion, I'm not asserting a position one way or another, but one of the vagaries in 115, there's certain things that probably were omitted that should have been included, and that would have been the actual legal authority to deal with issues like this, and that's one of the problems that is in 115. But I yield on that point. I've made my issue. Okay, thank you.
And I'll say there's been this is not a new issue. We've had multiple conversations, as Co-Chair Adams said, that we have email threads regarding the matter, but also conversations where the law director has stated that state law supersedes the charter and the CBA having authority over this matter, and we disagree. Like you, we and Co-Chair Adams and I and the executive director, we agree with you that, you know, we have this authority and the CBA does not determine what our authority is. So that's why we move forward, but we can, you know, look for that decision he made in writing. But we've had multiple phone conversations and email threads where this has been stated.
Let me say this too. The research on this is probably probably available. The research on this shouldn't be that expensive, and it should. So I'm saying that in our desire to get a legal interpretation of this, it should not be that difficult, because this, you know, this is the first time this hasn't come up about what supersedes what when it comes to the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm sure that we have two members who were probably formerly members of the CPPA and who've been in this debate before. It's just first time for us. But this has been discussed a couple of times. Okay, thank you.
So that was a Great discussion. Are we ready to take the vote? A motion to consult with legal counsel regard. Yes. Okay. Co-Chair Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Chura? Commissioner Kincaid?
No, I don't think I want to take that step yet.
Commissioner Mason?
Yes.
Commissioner Miller? Commissioner Moreira Benito?
Yes.
Commissioner Nelson?
I'm going to abstain.
Commissioner Ummelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Van Leer?
Yes.
And I vote yes, that passes. Is that all, Commissioner Benito?
That's all.
Okay, so next on the agenda is our policy committee report given by its chair, Pete Van Leer.
Oh,
Well, he.
if you click the,
So can
Oh.
just please take
okay, so we'll get started talking though, because that comes up, that's not right away anyway. So, yeah, we have three major things on our agenda for policy tonight. We have the wearable camera systems GPOs, there are 3 of them, and I'd like to bring those to a discussion and vote. Vehicle pursuits is a vote, and corrective action is more presentation. So we have a little bit of time on that because it's that's not the immediate thing, but it'd be good to get it going. Yeah, thank you for flagging that. So last week, at the last, we passed this. There are 3 GPOs related to wearable camera and in-car camera systems: 4.06.14, 0.15, and 0.16. The first is definitions. Second is the general, the more substantial GPO, and the third is supervisory reviews and investigations. We passed all 3 of these previously as a commission, and then we got feedback from the division with some concerns, most really about 4.06.15. And in the end, it's really not substantive, but we wanted to address them. And last week at the policy committee meeting on Thursday, we passed all 3. And then sharing, and the division's policy unit, Commander Muscle, was in attendance, and we had a lot of discussion with him. And so when I send them back out to you all and also to the division's policy unit, to Deputy Chief Schlott and Commander Muscle, they again responded with some questions and concerns. And so I'm bringing this GPO to you, 4.06.15, which I had staff print out, just to show you where the non-substance changes are since we voted in committee. So I want that to be clear. So I would love to vote on these tonight, but if there are too many concerns about not having gone through committee on these non-substantive changes, then we can talk about that. But I will walk through them. There were 2 changes. If you look at the bottom of page 2, section N, there was a mention of just a uniform, doing authorized secondary employment in uniform, and they had asked that to be CDP Class B uniform. And when we discussed this last week, I had missed one of the mentions of uniform. So now they're on page 2, at the bottom of page 2, and also on page 9.
What letter? I'm sorry.
And at the very bottom.
Under N.
Yeah, it says in CDP Class B uniform. Previously, it had said just uniform, and the division wanted to be clarified that it was in Class B uniform. The other one is on page 9. This mention of the same thing. Middle of page 9, section 4. It says also in 4A, at the right in the middle, under secondary employment, officers shall use their WCS while working authorized secondary employment in CDP Class B uniform. And previously, that reference hadn't said clearly CDP Class B uniform. So those are 2 changes. I don't see them as substantive, but I want to highlight them. Also, in section 3A, there was a tracking software question, and we revised that, and that is on page 7, toward the bottom, 3A, under categorizing and retention of captured media. And basically, it just clarified language around, it says captured media that an officer believes needs to be retained longer than a retention period shall be documented in the division's tracking software system. And the officer shall describe the reason and forward electronically through the chain of command to the mobile support unit. Previously, it had used language like scanned, and they were like, they don't scan anything, they forward it and that kind of thing. So this is, again, just clarifying how that process is supposed to work. So that's the second change I wanted to flag.
What number?
Section 3 on page 7, A, 3A. Captured media that an officer believes needs to be retained longer. So that's the one change since the policy committee voted last week. And then in 3B1, which is at the top of page 8, so the same section 3, B gets split onto the next page. It had said homicide, sex crimes, and crowd management, parentheses, permanent retention. And they said that doesn't make any sense. We want to just say permanent retention, and then you have the list. So that's the other change. Otherwise, these are identical really to what we passed in committee and really what we passed at the last full commission meeting. Those were the changes they had, and we'd missed a couple things, and we hadn't talked about that last one, even though they had flagged it with the division. So those are the changes. The other two are identical, essentially identical to what we passed last time in the full commission and now in committee last week. So those are the three. Are there, well, I will make a motion to pass those three. No, it's separate.
Before you put the motion on, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah.
Are the changes, I've read the changes, but could we, in the future, and you may do it already, are the changes italicized from the original language?
No,
Okay.
they're not.
All right, okay.
I
It may
just
be-
talked through them because there weren't that many, so.
Mr. Jackson saying they are?
Well, there are a lot of
Okay,
things
all right.
italicized. There are a lot of
Oh,
things
yeah,
italicized.
yeah, I was saying, so the, okay.
Not
so
just our edits.
Okay, so the new stuff isn't italicized, okay.
It's replaced whatever we did before.
Yeah. So I'd like to, in the future, if you could
Of course.
have whoever puts it together just
Of course.
italicize the changes.
I make a motion that we pass the 3 GPOs as a package.
Is there a second
Second.
discussion?
Makes sense to me.
Okay, if none, we'll call the vote. Co-Chair Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Chura?
Aye.
Commissioner Kincaid?
Aye.
Commissioner Mason?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller?
Aye.
Commissioner Marrera Benito?
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Umason?
Aye.
Commissioner Van Leer?
Aye.
And I vote yes, that passes.
Okay, next on our agenda here is vehicle pursuits, and I will defer to Commissioner Marrera Benito, who's been leading this work.
Sure. So the vehicle pursuits policy is back. The commission declined to vote on it last 2 meetings ago, I believe, for further exploration of a potential notification system that could go out between CDT and schools or community centers. We did explore that. We found that it was a system that was not yet built practical. It would require building like an entire kind of like Amber Alert system, which is just not feasible at this time. And so I thought it was great for us to further explore, but it was just not feasible. So we are bringing the Pursuits GPO back. No other changes have been made since it was presented to the commission the first time. And we did, but just for good measure, we did pass it again out of committee. And so I move to approve the vehicle pursuits GPO.
Second.
What's the number? Oh, great.
Any discussion?
Yes. Chair.
I'll defer to Chief Mason.
And I'm gonna bring it back to you all, as I said before. How can you all say to these officers that they will not pursue any vehicles during the hours of 2 to 5? First of all, you gotta remember, we have kids that are going to school in the morning. So are we gonna forget about the kids in the morning? And then secondly, you got only Cleveland school system. How many school systems do Cleveland represent? So that section right there should be taken out. And I'm going to hold to that, and I will not vote on that, and I'm going to hold strong. It's like we're only saying officers can only pursue between the hours of 2 to 5. 2 to 5 after school. What about going to school? We're not giving any consideration to the schools in the morning, the kids in the morning.
How does that affect summertime when kids not in school at all? They just
And now you're telling the officers most the time, 90% of the time, a pursuit is not, an officer do not start the incident. It's the suspect. So what you're gonna say, the suspect take off, so y'all stop. Don't do nothing between the hours of 2 to 5. Monday through Friday. That don't even sound right. If we're going to do it, let's do it on a whole. Take that part out and have discretions. There are things in there that can be worked out, and I said it before and I'm going to say it again. You cannot put these restraints on these officers during that time. And you got other schools. Y'all only checked in Cleveland school system. What about these other school systems that's out there? We don't care. Cleveland super patrol all of that. Yes, I'm pissed because y'all still want to be stuck on that one section, and that's unfair to the citizens of Cleveland. Because I have a kid to go to a charter school. So what you gonna say? That charter school don't count? A grandkid. I don't have a kid. I'm sorry. Grandkid.
If I,
I'm too old for
just
children.
a concrete response, I mean, this is the city of Cleveland, and schools tend to release between that time. I mean, I'm not to address your other questions, but I don't think it matters if it's, I'm not sure why you bring up just the one Cleveland system, because that's a general release time.
That's what you
I
have
know,
here.
but I'm
Take it out. And then
can I
you won't have
please
me.
can I please speak?
No.
I'm speaking. I'm just like trying to understand. I realize the language is in there about the Cleveland schools, but it would be a blanket thing. So I'm just want to ask about that. Besides, it would apply to all schools that are in the city of Cleveland, because if they release during that time, and they generally do.
Words are important.
I understand.
You only got
I
CMSD.
understand that. I heard that already 5
Okay,
times.
so then you keep
So-
saying other words.
No, but I wish you would just let me speak, because I'm just trying to understand what you're saying besides what you've repeated. So I appreciate your comments, and I'm trying to be polite and understand.
Through the chair, if I may. So,
Okay, so what I want to do is say, I want to stop. I think that for order, I think Commissioner Van Leer was in the middle of his response trying to address Commissioner Mason. So I would like for him to be able to finish, and then we can call on you after he finishes his statement. I just want to make sure that he gets to finish.
That was all I had, was just sort of trying to clarify that it does apply, and I understand the language piece that you're talking about. So I hear you, but I'm just trying to say it does apply to all schools because of the timing.
Was he
Yeah,
Commissioner Nelson, then
yes.
Commissioner Kincaid.
To the chair and the commissioners, I'm still stuck on the issue of an alert. When this day of technology that's advanced way beyond anything we can control, knowing that there is an Amber Alert system that warns people or informs people whenever there's a child missing or a senior missing, to the fact it can disrupt the car, knowing that when people run from the police, now I'm not talking about the police part, I'm talking about the people running from the police. They're driving a $3,000 to $5,000 weapon, 3 to 5,000 pound weapon through a neighborhood. They usually have no control. I was up on 146 in Bartlett The car not only ran through the fence, knocked the pole over, and flipped over on its side. The police were chasing it. The police were way down the street. But this was an idiot that was just charging down the street. When a person like that is fleeing, they are a danger to everyone in their path. If you happen to be in their path, it is a danger to you as well. We have radio stations that cooperate with our police department. We have available technology at probably minimum cost that will allow a broadcast, a stay-in-place broadcast to school systems, a general broadcast over the radio that will alert that a chase or a fool is running through our community, endangering everybody in the community along that path. And I think that we should explore that. Now, this is not something that has to be found. I think the entire city council and everybody, if we play this right and alert them, will sign on to something like this. So I'm not asking you to change your pursuit policy. This is something that goes way beyond what we're talking about right now, because this is about danger to the entire community. So I'm not telling you not to pass this, but be alert that there will be possible amendments to it. And I'll just push this through another way. But I don't think that abandoning this because of cost or impracticality is the final decision on this matter. Thank you.
Can I just respond? Is that through the chair?
And
So we
Commissioner
did,
Kincaid.
I mean, I appreciate your response. We talked about this before, and Commissioner Mason connected me to somebody in CMSD, and they'd have the one-way system, so they send alerts out to the police, but there was nothing and I know you're not talking about something that's in place that, whatever, but I think it's obviously not existent now. There was talk of connecting me to other police departments in the area, and that never happened. So I think in terms of this policy, from my perspective, and there may be other, I'm not sure I'm the only person who has the answer or an answer, because there may be different responses, but that what we can do with this particular GPO and within our authority is to work within existing systems. So I think if there's a way to create a different system through council or whatever, that certainly would make sense. But I'm not sure we have the power to do that, and I could be wrong, but that's my sense.
Commissioner Kincaid.
Okay, so two things. So if I am understanding correctly from your point of view, and I actually completely agree with you, in my opinion, stating a very specific time frame doesn't make sense to me, because I guess and I understand the implication of safety very specifically to children, and I understand why that is important, seeing as I have a small child, right? However, I personally don't think that the risk is any greater just during those specific times simply because of school let out than it is at any other time. Because again, how does this apply in times where school is not a factor? How does this apply during Christmas break or summer vacation, or when my non-school age child is outside playing and I live on a Cleveland street that is extremely busy, where a woman died just a couple of months ago because this person wasn't even running from the police, to Judge Nelson's point, they were just driving like an absolute maniac. So I personally also agree that the time frame thing I don't think it's fair. I think it is a little too limiting, and there is not enough to that point. There's not enough detail or stipulations, I think, to support that. But also, I think the harping on the CMSD thing, if I may explain further, or in my opinion, it's kind of similar, in my opinion, to what the police department did with our last GPO and made it very specific about what type of uniform, right? Because to Chief Mason's point, words do matter. And so if we are just talking about school being the issue, I do think it would be a simple fix or a simple change to remove the language of CMSD and simply put schools in the greater Cleveland area, right? Because we only have control over this right here, right? Cleveland, to your point. But if we remove that language and simply say schools inside of the city limits of Cleveland, I think that's one of those very specific things that makes sense.
I think no. Is it on? But you can't hear me though. But you can't hear me. Oh, no, wait. I think it's back.
Okay, yeah. So I could respond. I mean, and I'm looking at the language now, and I appreciate you raising this. It says officers shall not initiate pursuits between the hours of 2 to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday during the CMSD school year. So one could say removing CMSD simply would answer at least that piece of your concern. I understand there are other concerns. I mean, because it is within the city of Cleveland or the school. I mean, is that simple enough, just removing CMSD, or? And again, I know you have other concerns besides that. But yeah, I know. I'm just trying to address the one thing at a time. So, is that meet that concern? So just say the school year.
Yeah.
Okay. I know that there's more concerns, but I just want to.
So Commissioner Van Leeuwen, what if we just take out the CMSD between, say, Monday through Friday when school is in session within the city limits of Cleveland?
So that would be a friendly amendment to do that. I mean, I would be happy to make that, although
Yeah.
Somebody's got a short going on.
It sounds like down here. There we go.
Are we back?
Yeah. So friendly amendment to take out the mention of CMSD and just have it during the school year.
And then perhaps for consistency, just add the 7 to 9 a.m. You want consistency? Listen. There's an argument of consistency that was raised. I'm just proposing that if this Commissioner Mason feels that it's not consistent, she doesn't support it, but she also pointed out that it's not consistent.
I don't support that one section, that one paragraph. I support the pursuit. I don't support that one section.
To the chair of the committee. Oh, I'm sorry. Somebody. Yeah.
To the chair, schools are already mentioned in the GPO earlier, and it takes in weather conditions, all the other stuff that's mentioned. Schools are in there about what they have to take that in consideration when they conduct a pursuit. Supervisors have to take that into consideration. It's already there. If you're going to narrow it down to 2 to 5, I'll tell you what, if I go to a life of crime, that's where I'm going to be doing my crimes. And I believe everything that she said, I agree with it.
Mr. Chairman, has everyone had a chance to speak?
Go ahead, Commissioner Nelson.
Okay. I was reading this allowed scenarios. Of course, you guys know them. Pursuits are limited to cases involving violent felonies, robbery, murder, felonious assault, or OVIs. The person that's running don't care what time it is. And usually it's not the chaser, it's the runner. Now, of course, there have been occasions where there's been over pursuit, but there are things that are written in here. And I know there's Tamia Chapman, that was a tragedy, and it was terrible. And if there was over pursuit, there are also prohibitions in here. So if we emphasize those prohibitions, and I'm sure that Commissioner Van Leer and the committee has really taken all this into consideration. But I'm really concerned, and not only for school children, I'm concerned for you guys. You know, because there are some fools out here. I'm here to tell you, and you've probably seen them flying down the street, man. And so just consider those things as you consider this motion. Now, I believe the policy addresses most of these things. It's just that, you know, I don't know if the officer is going to be checking his watch. Say, well, look, I got to stop this. It's 2 o'clock. But I think you all have really talked about this, so I'll yield any further conversation on it.
Thank you. Commissioner Benito.
Hello? Okay. I just want to address the question of why we instituted it at the end of the day and not the beginning of the day. I think it's a very fair question. From my experience in watching kids, I don't have kids, but watching kids, is that when they're going to school, they tend to be walking to school and going into school. When school gets out, they're hanging out, they're sitting outside, they're standing outside talking, they're in groups more. So I think that there is a greater potential risk for children to be hit in those times, and so in the after school hours. So that's my reasoning of why we put that in. But I understand that do we not care about kids in the morning? We do, for the record, we do care about kids in the morning. But I think it's a fair. Yeah, I hear Commissioner Mason's point, and I think the commission, like, when we were doing this, we went back and forth a lot on this point. We are trying to thread the needle of balancing the potential risk that comes with pursuits, because every pursuit comes with risk. Because once a pursuit starts, you already have a driver that's driving recklessly that starts to drive even more recklessly. And so, to me, every pursuit comes with significant risk to the community. So how do we balance that with wanting to make sure that we empower our officers to address crime and to ensure public safety? My suggestion would be, it seems like I think we have two options moving forward. We can vote on the policy as it's written. I hear the opposition. I understand the perspective, and I respect it. We can vote and see how that vote plays out. The other thing is somebody could make a friendly amendment to strike that part of the policy, and we could have a vote on the commission on that friendly amendment and see where the majority of commissioners are, if they support that restriction or not. And so that is what I would suggest, that we kind of move forward on that.
Commissioner Kincaid, I think our mics are out. My mic is out again.
So, my question was, because I'm pretty sure it was me that broke it. Is there not a world in which, instead of creating this extremely rigid no pursuit between 2 to 5, we can create some discretionary language that says between 2 and 5, additional discretion needs to be implemented? So we already have, to Commissioner Chura's point, we already have stipulation overall for the reasons for a pursuit in the first place. If we narrow it between those hours to say, listen, if you chasing somebody in school hours, the discretion, like the reason better rise to this, or this. And that's it, right? Is there not a world where that exists? Right, but does it not just specify those things?
Everything. One paragraph. It outlines everything that they should be doing, who they should be getting approval from. If this happens, this is what you do. Everything is there. Just take out that one section, because you are limiting. You're saying to the officer, you're good. From 2 to 5, you can do what the criminal, you can do what you want to do. And to me, that's doing defamation to us.
I'm not
as a
disagreeing.
citizen.
I'm not. What I'm saying isn't to disagree with what you're saying. To that point.
Okay, so to Commissioner Chura's point earlier, he also mentioned that there is other language around schools. So on page 3, section C1, it says whether time of day, when initiating or continuing a pursuit, officers shall continually take into consideration other factors such as weather, time of day, lighting, visibility, volume of traffic, road conditions, etc., and proximity to certain areas, that is schools, parks, playgrounds, venues associated with crowds. So during those times when pedestrians are reasonably perceived to be active. So one could argue that that already includes awareness of where you are and who's around. So one, again, an amendment could be made to strike that one, the section in question that mentions the 2 to 5 p.m. during the CMSD school year, and we can second that. Somebody can second that amendment, and then we can take a vote on the amendment, and then we'd be clear on what we're voting on.
Mr. Chairman, to the committee chairman, I'll defer to Commissioner Mason since it was her issue. Commissioner Mason, you want to make that amendment?
To strike that one paragraph out? Say what you said, put it together now.
Just say, make an amendment to, I can do it. So I'll make an amendment to strike section E1 on page 6 that includes language around prohibiting searches, initiating pursuits at 2 to 5 p.m. during the school year.
Second. Unless Commissioner Mason, you want to second it?
Definitely a second.
Okay, all right. I withdraw my second and defer to Commissioner Mason. To the chair, I'm going to be leaving in a moment.
Okay,
but I want to support this amendment
okay,
and the policy.
Okay, so this vote is to strike section 2E1 from the vehicle pursuit policy. Co-Chair Adams.
Nay.
Commissioner Chura. The time frame. Initiate pursuits. Officers shall not, E1 is initiate pursuits between the hours of 2 p.m. to 5 p.m. Monday through Friday during the CMSD school year. When school is in session. Okay. Commissioner Kincaid.
Aye.
Commissioner Mason.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller.
Aye.
Commissioner Marrero Benito.
No.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye. Favor of the amendment.
Commissioner Umason.
No.
Commissioner Van Leer.
Aye.
And I vote no. It was 5. They got 5. It passes. Yeah.
So the motion is still current then to pass the GPO as revised with the amendment.
Co-Chair Adams.
Aye.
Commissioner Chura.
Okay, so just as clarity,
We did strike it.
the motion was to strike it out of the policy. It passed with 5 yeses. So that section is no longer there. So we're voting on the full policy now without that section being there. That's what we're voting on. Okay.
Hold on. Okay. Okay, yeah. Commissioner Chura.
Aye.
Commissioner Kincaid.
Aye.
Commissioner Mason.
Aye.
Commissioner Miller. Commissioner Marrero Benito.
Aye.
Commissioner Nelson.
Aye.
Commissioner Umason.
Aye.
Commissioner Van Leer.
Aye.
And I vote no. It passes.
To the chair, I'm going to be leaving early, and I have a question for you, and we don't have to entertain it now. Is there a copy of the, within the director's file or your file, the engagement letter for the law firm that filed the amicus brief? And if- I don't-
Order, like,
I'm asking the chairman.
I know, but we're
Because
in
I'm
the
going to
middle
be
of-
leaving, but you don't have to answer now, just if
It's
it's
just-
available. Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
alright.
Appreciate you.
We have a lot left, I think, so we need to keep moving. So, next on our agenda is not a vote, it's simply presentation, and if there are questions, I think this is going to be a process that we're going through on the corrective action GPO. It's projected there, which is partly for the audience and also for you all, and hopefully it can be visible on the live stream as well. So this corrective action GPO, we've passed it twice now. And we've gotten feedback and concerns, so we're trying to address those. And what happened last time we passed it, basically we got the feedback from the division, and we're working on the process with the division, but what we're doing now is, I did in this document, is looking at the things that were discussed with the division. I have the notes in the document, so it's a little bit easier to read. And the first notes that I have are on page 6 under violations. And first of all, with the division discussion is that there should be no such thing as non-disciplined violations. But this is at the core of what this document comes not just from, it's been worked on for a couple of years now, but also came back from, it was based on the previous commission and the work they had done to create a new discipline or corrective action policy. So there is pushback from the division around not wanting non-disciplinary violations, but again, that's very much a core part of this, what we're trying to do here. There's a list of things there: abusive language, tardiness, discourteousness, maintenance related, and these are what we see as there will be corrective action, but not necessarily discipline. And some of the questions are like how often, like we had a number of offenses in here, both for abusive language and tardiness, like 1 to 3 offenses would be non-disciplined. And so again, there's discussion, I think division saying don't have numbers in any of this. And we can see reasons for having numbers and saying, if you're late once or twice in a quarter, that's, it happens. There might be bad weather, there might be what have you. I mean, people are late. There's concerns that this would interfere with roll call, but we were hearing different things there. That's why we've also had some discussions with the Hispanic Police Officers Association, Black Shield, around these issues, and there's some arguments on both sides. From the command staff feels one way, and the officers on the road are a different way. In that same section, we had leaving zone without supervisory approval, and this is something that seems like this is maybe an older issue. Too often squads are asked to respond to a call in another district, and this could be used to say, well, I can't do it. So there's some questions around that still that and this is all stuff we're still going to be talking through and working on. And I would love for all of you, if you have questions, reach out to me or another committee member, Tara Coleman or Chandra Mira Benito, to discuss. And we might reach out to you all too. So that's one. I mean, I'm happy to answer questions. I think given the time frame, I'd rather not get too deep into it, especially since we're not voting tonight. But if there are any questions about that or points of clarification, please speak up. All right. Next, we have Group B, Group 1 violations on page 7, top of page 7. There was a description put forward, a global description that conduct has negative impact on the operations or professional image of the division, or that negatively impacts relationship with other officers, agencies, or the public. That wasn't in there, and we're not sure we're going to put it in there, but it's just like, this is like trying to define what this means. Tardiness is in there, and abusive language again. Page 7? Oh. And so Group 1 violations is at top of page 7. So tardiness is in there, but it was going to be more than 3 incidents. So then there was this discussion with the division. about, with the policy unit, the command staff, around why do you have numbers in here? And, you know, one argument they made was, well, you have, then people feel like they can be late 3 times a quarter. But then from one of the authors of and who's been a police officer, was like, well, people aren't doing that. They're not doing that on purpose. And again, what happens if there is a serious issue that you're late for, weather or whatever it might be? And it doesn't really interfere with roll call because we have 2 officers in the squad car. They update each other, and they, you know, that kind of thing. So abusive language, again, were there numbers in here or not? There's different levels of severity of infractions. Do we address that? Number of offenses in the same incident. What if there are more than one time? And we have some refined ideas there, potentially. Multiple violations arising from a single event or incident may escalate the disciplinary action to the maximum group range. Or then you have a member repeatedly commits the same minor infraction. You know, again, different ways of thinking about how we might address the concerns and making sure it's effective and reasonable. Am I missing anything, Commissioner? Talking a lot. And there's also the question of, yeah, I think I said, okay, yeah, I already had that. Moving on to group 2, there is a definition there given to conduct that's contrary to the division values of the division, interferes with its mission, operations, or professional image, or involves a demonstrable serious risk to officer of public safety. So that could be a way to define that. The questions that came up here were mostly around the word knowingly. You see at the beginning, toward the top, at the bottom of page 7, I highlighted knowingly there. And what does that mean? How do you define that? So there was some tentative agreement around maybe we get rid of that word, but there was also some questions like how do you say it was knowingly? Like people could just say, well, I didn't do it on purpose, and there might be evidence to the contrary. But if it is something more serious, like that leads to, it could bump it up without the knowingly piece, could be a higher infraction, right? Could be a higher discipline group.
One thing that you'll see throughout the policy is that one thing that we had that there was in the previous corrective action policy is that you would actually see the same violation in each category. And so then what would happen is that the division would look at the situation and say, I think this fits with a group 2 or group 3 or group 1. However, when thinking about fairness and consistency, and what we heard from some groups of officers was for the same infraction or same type of infraction, you got some people getting a group 1, some people getting a group 3, some people getting a group 2. So what we sought to do with this policy was to limit that discretion and to make clear, okay, this is what would make this type of violation a group 1 violation, a group 2, or a group 2 violation, group 1, group 3, etc. So part of what we did with some of the knowingly, intentionally, some of that language was trying to parse out the differences between those things. But the division has raised some valid questions of it is hard to pinpoint. You can't get in someone's brain, right? So you can't know what they knew exactly. So those are some things that we are still trying to figure out the best way to make sure that we are limiting discretion, that we are making very clear what level of discipline things should be as a way of reducing bias and reducing inequality in the way that discipline is given.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Thank you for that. That's very good context. Page 8, there's failure to respond, investigate. It's like the 7th or 8th bullet. There's a couple discussion points, like number of offenses, is that relevant here? And also the question of discretion, right, which we're trying to address, as Commissioner Marrero Benito said, but also the need to address different severity levels versus too much discretion. So that we have the consent decree because there was a lot of discretion being used, and it led to unfair treatment of officers, including on the basis of race. So how do we balance that? We want to limit discretion, but also understand there are different severity levels of infractions. So that's something we're going to be looking at. Moving on to group 3 violations. And again, feel free to jump in if you have a point of clarification or question. I'm talking fast because I want to get through this. Page 8, group 3, there's the knowingly. We flagged those questions. Under the same group 3, tactics, we talked about physical, emotional, economic harm. It originally just said harm, and we added some more definition there. And there's some discussion questions about significantly damaged. What does that mean? How do you measure that? There was some questions around using the words conduct unbecoming, but that is not used by the division generally. And there was also some general definitions, like how do we think about these group 3, the negative impact of group 3 as a general definition. And then on the top of page 9, workplace violence, we had included language around first offense excluding physical attacks. And there was, again, this discussion about, do you include number of offenses? And the division was pushing back on that, but we're also trying to find the balance of when does it become more of an issue than it would be otherwise if it just happens once and it's dealt with. Group 3, so that the very last one at the top of page 9 under group 3 violations was in the original draft as a group 4 violation, and it still is there if you look down at the end, I believe. Failure to fully cooperate with the Cleveland Community Police Commission in performing duties, of the officer of the division. So there's some question about whether that should be group 3 or group 4. The charter says that this is a terminable offense, which means you can be fired, which means it's group 4. But it doesn't necessarily, the language, we need to be very clear, look at the language again. Does it require termination? And I think you could argue it does not. So there's a question there again of severity and what that means. So I think that's something we're going to be looking at more deeply. And in group 4, you'll see that same language flagged because it's right now in both places for a reason, to keep it, because we have to figure that out. And then we'd added the very next one in group 4 violations at the bottom of that page. Racist, sexist, anti-LGBTQ plus, anti-immigrant, national origin-based or otherwise bigoted conduct, slurs, or language used in the course and scope of employment is defined in... No, it's not red. It says there's a note, a language added after the last vote on this GPO. What's that? So, and we put this in there because of some recent conversations and because this is actually in city charter. So it is the second last bullet point under group 4 violations. And that is new language since our last vote on this. And so essentially what happened when the division wanted to open up the conversation again, we were in the process of trying to get some conversations going with HPOA and Black Shield. And I've also had one conversation with CPPA. Since the division opened it up, we also looked at, okay, so we need to really get into this, and some other things came through, and I'll get to the Fairness and Consistency Committee in a minute. So at the bottom of page 9, there is ranges of corrective actions. We had non-discipline violations, had include referrals to employee assistance, but I think there was consensus that this is not appropriate because that's generally it's anonymous and it shouldn't be named. It's just everybody knows it's a tool, but the other pieces stay in there. Group 1, we in our draft say there are no aggravating or mitigating circumstances for this group 1 violations. CDP position is that there must be, and our position is that the charter does require aggravating and mitigating, but doesn't specify that every group has to have that. So that's an ongoing thing we're going to look at and come to a determination on. Continuing to move, here there's a lot of changes here, and I'm going to have to go pretty quickly, but just know that this is some pretty bigger issues, and it's already been mentioned in Commissioner Morera Benito's talk of the accountability work. But there's a lot of putting a timeline before the first formal hearing. We heard from Black Shield and HPOA that often there's very little notice of the first formal interview. or hearing, and we don't want it, at first we were saying just the first interview, but then sometimes internal affairs shows up at the scene, and they don't want to be limited to not being able to have an interview there. So we're making it more of the formal interview or hearing. So we're going to work on that language because people are saying they don't get that, and you can see the other notes there.
And the reason
Yeah.
why that would be an issue is that they might get the letter that says, or the notice that they're being investigated. They would want to be able to talk with the union attorney to prepare for those interviews. And so that's why, there's concern about them not having enough time, is for them to be able to have time to talk to representation and talk to the union.
And here's language we added, and I think actually you had said 48 hours, and here it's 72 hours. So we'll have to make sure which we want to do. But it's about the charge packet and sending the materials to the leadership of the relevant bargaining unit, the Black Shield, HPOA, the Public Safety Inspector General, the CPC, and the CPRB. So that's new language there. And the charging letter in C, on page 11, letter C, the charging letter will be sent before the pre-disciplinary hearing to the same entities. And here is where we get at the Fairness and Consistency Committee piece. So we had removed that before we voted last time and passed this. And in conversation with the Black Shield and Hispanic Police Officers Association, which had been named in the Fairness and Consistency Committee language, but there were a lot of concerns that would add another layer and more time. So this integrates them. They are currently included in a lot of this as a courtesy, but we heard from them very clearly that they think it's important that they are integrated into the process and are given a seat at the table, not as a courtesy, but as a requirement. And this would allow them to make a recommendation to the chief.
So one point on that is that right now they're invited to attend the hearing, but they don't get to speak, they don't get to make any recommendations. So this would not just give them the ability to sit in the hearing, but actually be a part of it.
And this is a tough issue we're going to have to really talk through and figure out. So it's in here now, but it's under discussion. They've raised questions, division has raised questions about, what if the officer doesn't want them there? They don't have legal capacity. Are they stepping on the toes of the union? And so again, this was trying to get to that fairness and consistency piece that was important in the last draft, and we let go of it just to keep things moving. But we're looking for other ways to make sure that this is that idea, given the history of unfair discipline, is included there. So I think that's it. That's a lot. But again, this is is a step in the process, and we'll have our next policy committee meeting, was it May 30th or something, 13th rather. But in between now and then, we welcome any conversations, if you have thoughts and ways to make this what it needs to be and what represents the full voice of the commission. So that's all I have.
Thank you very much. Our next committee update is budget and grants, given by the chair, Commissioner Imo Umasin.
Thank you for that. So I was going to do my motion first. So as Director Williams mentioned, Mr. Jackson was hired as for consulting for policy for the commission. So it has to just come out of a specific line item from our budget. So we do have a line item called other contractual. That's up to $7,000. So in our the Budget and Grants Committee meeting yesterday, we voted on using those funds not exceeding, this is a little too low, not exceeding $6,000, so that we can do that. So I just wanted to bring the motion forward now to use the other contractual line item out of our budget not to exceed $6,000 for the temporary hire of Mr. Jackson for policy.
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question. How long have we, or how long are we engaging with Mr. Jackson? And at what, are we able to discuss like maybe, I don't want to ask that question directly because I think that's in the group, but how long are we engaged? so in that 8 weeks, the idea is not to exceed $6,000 in the term of 8 weeks. Sorry. Like, where did that voice come from? Oh my God. So the idea is that we just won't exceed $6,000 in that 8 weeks, and if his rate exceeds that before the end of the 8 weeks, either we will have to renegotiate or we will terminate that contract at that point. Is that?
Right, I think that if, oh, no, I'm sorry, you can.
No, go ahead.
I just think that, I think we're doing this because if we spend over $5,000, we have to bring it to the budgeting, through the Budget and Grants Committee and to the full commission for approval. And then it's very possible that he may stay on longer, but I think if he was going to do that, I think Director Williams would probably let us know ahead of time, and then we would just come and do another vote.
Sure.
If we needed to. But right now, he's here, so
Yeah,
we
of
just
course.
want to go through the process. We like the work he's doing, but we just want to go through the formal process.
Oh, I don't disagree with any
Yeah.
of that. I just want to clarify
Yeah.
about the money. Okay, all right.
Yeah, thank you. And right, it's discretionary. So at least the ups to the 6,000, keeps us.
Jim is like, don't say another
Are there any more questions? If not, we're going to call the vote. Co-Chair Adams?
Aye.
Commissioner Chura? Commissioner Kincaid? Commissioner Mason?
Aye.
Commissioner Miller? Marrera Benito? Commissioner Umelson?
Aye.
Commissioner Van Leer?
Aye.
And I vote yes, that passes.
All right, thank you for that. The only other thing I was going to mention was we met with members of the law department earlier today as we're trying to focus on the goal was to kind of lump the 2024, 2025 grant, funding, giving people from 2024 the opportunity to apply and receive funds for 2025 if they still had projects going on. What we were trying to do was have the United Black Fund, who we're working with, to distribute the grant money to see if that was possible, even though it'd be retroactive. So we were told that we can't do that and have to go through this current process of each grantee getting a contract and that going through that process. So we'll see about that. We're still working on that, but going forward, 2026 and beyond, it only makes sense, working with a nonprofit that can distribute grant money for that to also be a part of kind of what they do to help us streamline that process. So that's all I have.
Thank you. Commissioner Antea Miller?
So just so you know, the training committee is caught up on all their training so far for 2026, and I also kind of feel some type of way. Let DC Schlott know to get back with me and return my email for training and for the community. That's it.
Okay. All right, and with that being said, we are at time. Our meeting ends at 8:30, so our meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.